All right, you are listening to the Brown Perspective. This is RO, and I'm here with Eduardo.
Aquí estamos reflexionando, viendo lo que está pasando en este mundo loco en el que vivimos.
I don't know if you're going to enjoy this podcast as much as I will.
Well, I will actually because, well, first of all, let's just say that
Well,
at the Brown Perspective, we always want to bring you conversations on a range of topics. And I think that we wanted to take this opportunity to talk and dive a little deeper into the what's going on at the U.S.-Mexico border, but particularly as it relates to the Haitian migrants. So
eh,
I know that for me, as a human being, as a Latino Americano, as an immigrant, my heart is just hurting right now.
yeah, and let me clarify what I meant when I said that I was going to enjoy this podcast a little more than you. Obviously, it is a serious topic. It's something that bothers us both, but I was saying more in the sense that this is happening under Biden's watch. This isn't
Mm-hmm.
Trump. We can't just yell and say, look at how bad Trump is. This is Biden, this is the Democrat, and this is horrible. And so, as someone that was always saying when Trump was in power, it's like, okay, you guys act like Trump is all of a sudden things are bad because Trump came into power. Not you necessarily, but just a lot of people. But now we can see that, hey, wait a minute, we have some serious problems here too, regardless of who's in power. So that's the aspect that I said that I was going to enjoy. Obviously, not what's going on because that's very serious and it's very unfortunate.
I got you. Yes, and I think as somebody who, as you said, has been on the other side of the equation and who had hoped that a new administration would bring a new approach, a more humane, and actually both President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris campaigned on that. They made that promise not only to the Latino, Asian, but also the Haitian American community because
Right.
they actually campaigned in Little Haiti and Miami. But in any case, I think we can certainly get into that. I know you also wanted to touch upon some of the history and the fact that in some ways the Western world hasn't forgotten Haiti for winning its revolution back in the day.
Yeah, yeah. The first and most successful slave revolt in history, and it seems like they just want to keep punishing them over and over. We give so much aid to other countries, European countries, countries in the Middle East, and Haiti being so small. Imagine how much $1 billion or a few $1 billion would go in terms of helping them. And what I mean in terms of helping them, very few strings attached. Because a lot of times, if the U.S. is going to give money, then there's a lot of strings attached. Like, yeah, we'll give you some money, but we don't like who's in power. We need somebody else in power. Like, none of those conditions, right? If they just gave them money to help them get better infrastructure, to rebuild, to have a better school system, then there's absolutely no reason why we don't do that, except for the fact that we just don't want to. And again, it goes back to that collective trauma that the Western world has, going back to the revolutionary Toussaint Louverture, and going back to that collective trauma that they still want to. It feels like they still want to punish Haiti. So just
Yeah.
wanted to mention that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, and I do think that we need to acknowledge that I mean the Haiti revolution, like any revolution, was bloody, and I know that part of the reason why some of these European powers came so hard down on Haiti is because they killed a lot of the white French who remained in the island because there was the fear that they would come back into power and back into slavery. But that's the other thing. Like you also need to acknowledge how horrible the institution of slavery was and what the Haitian people did was basically rebel against that horrible, grotesque institution of slavery that they themselves and those who came before them fought all the way through, right? They fought tooth and nail not to be enslaved.
It almost sounds like you're apologizing for Haitians killing all of their oppressors during the revolution. Look at and what I mean is that look, it's a revolution. There's obviously there's sides. There's an oppressor, and then there's the oppressed. The oppressed rise up, and they're going to overthrow the oppressors. So there's going to be a lot of blood involved. That's a revolution. Look at
Hmm.
instances where the United States conquered Native American people and went through villages and villages or camps of Native Americans and butchered everyone.
Yeah.
Right? So nobody, I don't hear anybody apologizing for doing those things, right? So it was the Haitian Revolution. They killed a lot of people. I think some, unfortunately, some innocent people probably died as well. And but it just, that's just what happened, and that's just, our history is riddled with incidents like that. But I don't think it makes Haiti an exception to what was going on in those times.
No,
Meaning,
you're
in,
right.
in terms of in terms of the brutality of and the acts that were committed.
No, you're right. But I think that in some ways that innocence is what each side tries to look for in justifying their actions. But I think the other point, to your point, and I think as a Colombian, I know that that sort of violence and that type of killing doesn't lead to a good place, right? It leads to resentment. It leads to more killing, more violence. So I
Yeah, but what's the
also
difference between Haiti and the United States? The U.S. has a good PR department. Haiti doesn't, right? So
yeah,
I guess I'm just trying to say,
touche.
let's not single out Haiti for that revolution, that it was bloody. I mean, if we're gonna go down that, then I have like 20, 1,000 other battles and encounters that I could show you where some pretty grotesque things happened.
Good point. I always appreciate you bringing in that broader historical perspective. And I love the fact that some on social media are highlighting some of the ways that Haiti, both while it was under French power, how they supported and were involved in the American Revolution. And also, I always enjoy and cherish telling people that if it weren't for the Haitians, once they were free, once they were looking to support other revolutionary movements in Latin America, they helped Simon Bolivar go back to Colombia once he was exiled. So they gave him the arms and the support that he needed to go back and retake his revolutionary cause, which eventually led to the freedom of Colombia and the rest of a lot of other countries in Latin America, Venezuela, Ecuador, etc. And I know that part of what they asked him to do was to make sure that he did away with slavery.
Yeah, and also when you're taking U.S. history, you often hear about the start of the U.S. Revolution, the shot heard around the world. But if you want to, instead, what you could say is actually the Haitian Revolution is where you could say instead that that's the shot heard around the world, because the implications and the ramifications of that successful revolution affected the entire continent, even in the United States with the eventual loss or selling of the French territory in the U.S.
Hmm.
That's all directly tied to France losing that very lucrative trade in Haiti as a result
Hmm.
of them being overthrown by that revolution. Let's get back to the current crisis with the Haitian immigrants. And so the one thing that surprised me a lot was definitely to see that there were a lot of Haitians at the border, but I wasn't as aware that waves had been coming for some time now. I figured, I thought of it in terms of like the waves that come from Central America, where all of a sudden you have a caravan that comes up, and then you have a humanitarian crisis at the border. I thought that we had a wave of recent Haitian immigrants that had come out and that were all of a sudden in the border. But just from reading this and going back and understanding this, it's been going on for a while, where we've had constant trickling in of Haitian immigrants that are making their way from Mexico, from further south into Central America, South America, to the U.S.
Hmm. Yes, and I think that's because a lot of them left Haiti after the earthquake and they went to other countries, Chile, Colombia, and other parts. And unfortunately, in order to get there, they sold everything they had, as it tends to happen when things go bad. And obviously, we faced a pandemic that destroyed the economy in many of these countries. And then at this point, they decided, and I do think part of the hope was there's a new administration in the U.S. Maybe there'll be more receptiveness to the plight of people who are fleeing violence and hunger, and to make the trip from, I mean, as far as down as Chile. And I know there's actually, as we speak, there's thousands of Haitian migrants stuck in Colombia trying to get to Panama in order to make that dangerous trek up the Central American jungle.
Yeah, and also, well, yeah, and here this summarizes what we're talking about, which is Haitians have been migrating to the U.S. in large numbers from South America for several years, having left the Caribbean nation after a devastating 2010 earthquake. After jobs started up in the 2016 Summer Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, many made the dangerous trek by foot, bus, and car to the U.S. border, including through the infamous Darien Gap, a Panamanian jungle. And you said there's some in Colombia. You mentioned also that there's some in Chile. And being Latinos, I know that the reality of these Haitians in this country is that they're treated no better than they are here at the U.S. border. Because I know that in Mexico, I'm sure there's a lot of stories of Mexicans being racist towards them, and not necessarily the people, although there's some of that racism there within the general population, but just the authorities, the government. Because
Hmm.
I was reading a thread on Twitter from a Canadian that was in Mexico, and he let his visa expire, and so he ended up getting detained, and he was put into a detention center until he sorted things out. And he was talking about the horrible conditions that they're in, especially with COVID and the non-existent safety measures that are taken, that they're just on paper. They're just safety measures that exist on paper. They're in practice, they don't actually happen, and a whole bunch of people crammed together in rooms. And as bad as it was for him, he mentioned how just terrible it is for some of the Haitian immigrants that are currently being detained there, because the U.S. and Mexico have this pact right now where Mexico detains a lot of the immigrants from Central America and Haiti as well. But just reading that and realizing just how bad it is for them too in Mexico is just, it's sad, just because it's our own people that are doing this to them. So let's not just pretend like it's America, that it's just white Americans that do this to Haitians.
That's true, and I think that's a good point to acknowledge the fact that the reason why they're being treated, and the reason why the images that we saw this week of white officers and on horseback
Right
with
here, yeah.
whips, detaining these immigrants is because of race, right? And again, it is race related, and is the race power. And then when you think about some of the other individuals in that camp, they are also Central Americans, folks who are perhaps a little bit more indigenous, mestizo, poor, and a lot of those racist historical policies have kept these people in these positions that now is forcing them to seek a better opportunity. And I think they're counting on the U.S. to live up to our values, and do a better job at helping them, embracing them. And also, and I think when you think of the way that in the politics, right? Because I know that, and I know it's somewhat different, because there are actually Cubans within that camp that was under the the bridge. But for the longest time, if you were Cuban and you were Haitian, you were treated very differently, right? You, as a Cuban refugee, you were embraced, you were given support and help, and the Haitians were sent back, or not given the same type of support that they needed. And I think a lot of that is driven by race, driven by politics, and it's sad to witness.
Yeah, this isn't a good look, these pictures. And did you see the press conference where they were talking about banning horses? They went out of their way to say how terrible this was, but they didn't mention the actual whipping. It's like, oh, they didn't even mention that. It's like, why are these guys? Why do they have whips to begin with? They just mentioned, oh, we've gotten rid of the horses, right? As if the horse is really the bad thing. I mean, obviously this isn't a good look, but it's just the treatment that they're getting that was the problem, not necessarily the
It's
horses.
inhumane. Yeah, it's inhumane. It's not how we should be treated, like how anyone should be treated.
And
And then, and the saddest thing is part of that he's coming back from going through the river, going through Mexico to get food, probably for his family, which is why he's carrying it in those bags.
Yep, the plastic bags. It all, the language barrier doesn't help either. At least crossing through Latin America and being in Mexico, that they, to what extent they speak Spanish, I'm not sure,
A good
but
number of them are, though, in part because some of them were had spent a lot more time in Chile and other countries. So actually, kudos to Univision, who I think for the first time in a long time is doing a really good job capturing and being at the border, capturing some of those stories. So I think that some of them do speak Spanish, but yeah, there seems to be that slight cultural differences because of they speak French, but I think nos entendemos,
yeah.
whether it's Espanol, French, we can understand each other. And I think hopefully now that we are out of Afghanistan, the U.S. has a billion or $2 that we can try to invest in addressing this situation in a constructive way.
Yeah, don't hold your breath. The way that money is allocated is just not. I mean, I know that we are going to talk later about the AOC's tax the rich dress, but it doesn't matter if you're collecting a ton of tax money from the middle class, the working class, and from the wealthy, if you're going to use all that money if you're just going to squander it in wars and not actually doing something productive like helping countries like Haiti rebuild and develop.
I agree, and I know that immigration is such a complicated issue. The system is broken, but it can be fixed. And to your point too, like it does take investment in Latin America, and it takes leadership in Latin America too to address these sort of the push factors as well. So
One
well,
other
here
thing
we
that
are getting ready for a midterm election, and we'll see how all of this is going to play out in the next few months.
Yeah, and when it comes to politics, one of the things that is really frustrating about this is that the entire liberal sphere, it would have gone bananas had this been under the Trump administration. But they're not doing this because it's Biden. And I've always said we have to criticize them equally. We can't give them a pass because they're Democrat. We can't say, well, they have good intentions, but maybe they dropped the ball here. It's like, no, this is terrible. And the same way that we would have called it out under Trump, that's how people need to call it out under Biden.
Yeah,
We need to pressure them because these politicians are not, if they're not getting pressured from the regular people, then they're only going to do as much as we force them to do. So I'd like to see a lot more criticism of Biden at the level that they were hurling at Trump. Now, I know people would have said, well, Trump's a racist and, he by nature, he's evil and he actually takes pleasure out of doing this, but Biden is not racist and maybe he just dropped the ball. So, yeah, I don't think we should start parsing it like that. This is just horrible and it's happening under both administrations and it's not really going to change because, right, the president goes in and it's not like he all of a sudden overhauls ICE and changes the director and fires everyone and then brings in a group of progressive employees to work at ICE. They don't. These institutions don't change like that, right? They change slowly, and hopefully now as a result of this is a good opportunity to start yelling at the top of our lungs at Biden and Kamala Harris that, hey, this is not acceptable, and you guys need to do something about it.
that's true. And I think, and I agree with you. And at the same time, I think the Republicans also need to step up. And I think that unfortunately, this is a winning issue for them, right? They're using this to rally up the base to show that, oh, look, this Democratic administration is struggling with this. Trump was right, you know, and I think that that's not the case. The Republicans need to realize that they need to step up too. They need to support those um, those policies that immigration comprehensive immigration reform as they once did because it's important because it's not a democratic issue, it's not a republican issue, is an american issue, is a human issue too. And I think that and you're absolutely right. The Democrats need to address it because they're currently in power. For how long, we'll see. But everybody needs to step up as well. And then I know labor needs to step up,
Hmm.
unions needs to step up. Like you said, all of those political interests that benefit from immigrant labor, from immigrant consumers need to step up and make sure that this is done, that this is prioritized.
Yep. Now the other thing, assuming that they get a chance to present their case for asylum at some point, do you think they have a valid claim for asylum? Do you think that, well, one thing is, do we think is valid? And also, will the immigration asylum officials, the ones that review their cases, will they actually find reasonable justification for granting them asylum? Because I know that economically, I know that Haiti is a very poor country. They're undergoing a lot of problems right now, especially after that earthquake and then the recent assassination of the president. So, but I don't know if that automatically will qualify them as refugees.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. And I think, but what it does do is that while they're pursuing their case, they are not whipped and chased on horseback. They are processed. They are told, what to do, when to come back to the proceedings. They're given an opportunity to present the evidence. And you're right, maybe not all of them have valid reasons under current refugee law because unfortunately, being poor, being part of these of the circumstances that force you to risk not only your life but the life of your kid, right? And you're a father now. Think about what would drive a father or mother to go through the jungle, to be subject to violence in order to give that kid and yourself a better chance at a future. So maybe, probably, and I don't know if there's statistics on this, but maybe even if only 5% of the people who present themselves at the border have a reasonable case, at least they were treated with dignity, given the opportunity at least to come here, present a case, and maybe they will be in a better position to go back to Mexico or Colombia or Chile or maybe back to Haiti and do so in a way that is not the way that's happening now.
Agreed. Totally agree with that.
I know I'm an idealistic optimist, um, but I know that there's certainly a better way to do this, and for us to step up to be the nation of immigrants that we are.
Yeah, no, I know, I agree with you. I'm a pessimist in theory, but an optimist in practice. So I'm also optimistic in some
Yes, we're
level.
more practical.
Yeah, I
You
just
have
know
your
that
practical streak.
I just know that these things don't change as long if the people are not demanding them, and if Twitter conversations and social media and the general discourse devolves into people fighting with each other about whether or not they're refugees, about whether or not we should allow them into our country. Once the conversation breaks down along those lines and people start expending all of their energy doing that, then that's not energy that's being focused at our institutions to change, right? So if we all as Americans collectively forced our institutions to change, then they would. But if we just start fighting each other about the technicalities of, well, they shouldn't have come anyway, like, why are they coming? Why can't they get their shit together in Haiti? It's not our fault, right? You're gonna hear hundreds of excuses from people, and then you're gonna get other people that are gonna get suckered into those conversations. And at the end of the day, yeah, we let the politicians and the institutions off the hook, and so
Hmm.
that I am optimistic that things could change, but it I've always said it comes from the people. Like we get what we ask for if we as long as we ask for it in a united way.
Good point. Although now it's there's about a third of the country who still thinks that the election was not fair. So I think we are at a place where we've been in a different place, but where people don't necessarily agree. And I think that's the scariest thing, that not only are we fighting each other, but now we're questioning the confidence of the democratic institutions, of elections. And then, I think if that continues to be the case, eventually it's just going to be a de-escalation to civil war, basically. People fighting and
Yeah,
angry to each other because of perceived grievances.
yeah, it's gotten to the point in some instances where people can't even talk to each other from the different camps, and that's not good when you can't have dialogue.
Hmm.
So, yeah, well, let's hope that it doesn't go that far. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I think the people should know that they can always count on you and I to talk about these issues, and hopefully we'll get to a better place.
All right. If you're out there like and enjoy our content, make sure to check us out. We are Brown Perspective. We are on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Nos vemos.